Hello, this is Willie Mast giving the life story of Robert Kenneth Mast, otherwise affectionately known as Bobby. So I'm going to be showing you some black and white photographs taken by my mother's old box camera, which took 110 black and white film. You rolled it up inside the box camera and then took all your pictures, and then you sent it off for development. And so here we have Robert Kenneth Mast, born on July 29th, 1948. And here you have my mother Sylvia holding Bobby at age about 3 or 4 months old. And he was outside the front porch of our Hartley house, and she was holding him there. I remember when Bobby was born. He was born in the night time. We were all in the chicken house. The chicken house that was closest to our farmhouse had lots of clean paper on the floor of the house. We were getting ready to have new chicks in several days, and there were lots of funnies, comics on these papers, and we were there reading the comics, and we were told that our mother Sylvia was inside the farmhouse and Dr. Gilliam was there. Dr. Gilliam did house calls and he made home deliveries, and Bobby was delivered inside our house there in Hartley. And so it was about midnight or so when they came and told us that my mother had delivered Bobby, and so we were all very happy. He was the youngest in the family, and so all of us remember taking care of Bobby as he grew older. So here we have the first photograph, and then we have another one. And this is Irene. And see if I can make it a little larger. Irene was there holding Bobby in our barnyard. And there was the old truck. This was in 1948. Bobby was about 2 months old. This was a truck which we used for the farm and also for the sawmill. There you see a milk can in the background, the barn in the background, and Irene was there holding Bobby. Irene was at that time 13 years old. And here we see Bobby sitting in the backyard. He was sitting in the backyard there, and our garden was behind this fence, and the house was behind us. Here Bobby had on a homemade coat, which undoubtedly my mother had made for him, and he was about 3 or 4 months old that time. And then I remember very well this session where we took Bobby inside the dining room, and my mother had her box camera and she put him next to the window here and took his picture, but it was pretty dark in that room. There was a shadow across his face, so we couldn't see his face very well. So here Bobby was having his picture taken about age 4 months, and as you can see here, he had his hand up in the air, and we were really quite excited over taking a picture of the baby. And here we see Bobby in the sawmill yard. Bobby was there in the sawmill yard, and he was happy and smiling, and he was a very happy young boy there. He was about a year old then. That was in about 1949, summer of 1949. Here we see some of the logs in the background and the chicken house in the background. At that time, Bobby was developing normally, and he was beginning to say a few words. Mama and a few other words. Mom and a few other words. And here's another picture of Bobby. laughing in the sawmill yard. And again, he was about a year old there. And then we see Bobby. You see lumber here, boards, and the sawmill was to your right here. And here you see the house. This was the garage where we parked our car, and the chicken house. And Clarence and Bobby was about a year and a half old, and Clarence was about 5 or 6 years old here in this picture. Okay, here we see the family picture taken in the year 1950. And in the year 1950, my father was 40 years old, and my mother was 41. My mother was 6 months older than my father. Clarence and Sylvia Mast. And there you see Bobby, and he was about age 2 years old. And Lawrence was 20, and I was 10 years old. Clarence was 6. Aubrey was 15, Lila was 17, and Danny was 18. So here we were all lined up in front of the chicken house. This was the chicken house closest to the farm building. This was the chicken house where we were in when Bobby was born. In the house, we were here on the newly strewn newspapers across the floor of this chicken house. Here we see a picture of the family taken in 1954, and Mom was 45 and Dad was 44. Here you see Lawrence, the oldest, was 24. Bobby was 6 years old, and Carolyn was holding Louise, 1 year old. Dale was 2 years old, and Karen was 3 years old. So they were like stair steps. I was 14 years old. Clarence was 10 years old. And we gathered together in front of the kitchen utility room area of our farmhouse to have this family picture taken back in 1954. At this time, Bobby was not talking, and my mother and father, Clarence and Sylvia Mast, took him all over the eastern part of the United States looking for someone to give him special treatment so he could talk. And they couldn't find anyone. People gave him treatments, but they didn't really help. And so we were sensed their frustration because they weren't really aware of the fact that Bobby, at a year and a half, had received an experimental vaccine which they injected, causing him to have a fever of 108 degrees Fahrenheit, and this cooked his brain, destroyed his brain, severe brain damage. And the first thing that we saw was he couldn't talk, but later on, he was about 6 years old. About this age, he began to have seizures and needed to have anti-seizure medication. And at this point, we saw that there was something radically wrong with him. Here was Bobby in 1957. He was about 9 years old. Dan and Betty were here. They were celebrating their wedding party. They had gone to South Carolina to get married, and so we had a wedding dinner here. And this is Simon Hirschberger, Betty's father. And here was Bobby. Betty, Danny, and Bobby. Bobby was about 9 years old there. And he couldn't talk yet, and he was very hyperactive, and when he was angry, he would bite his wrist. Bite his wrist like this. And he was hurting himself, and he thought he was hurting you, since he was hurting himself. And he would jump up and down and dance. Here we see the barnyard. This was Lily's 1951 Ford. This is our farm truck, red farm truck, which we used for farm purposes and also for the sawmill. And our barn and milk house, which are still standing today. And here we see the granary here. And here's our Ford tractor. And the granary had a hammer mill to grind corn and wheat and barley. And the hammer mill would make a lot of noise while it was grinding. And Bobby would stick his head in between the belts going from the tractor to the hammer mill. And Danny would very quickly jump out the back window of this hammer mill shed and run around and rescue Bobby. And Bobby thought it was a big joke, so he would do this as a joke, not realizing that his life was in danger. Here we see the barn, the milk house, and the sheds. And we see Buggy, Amish Buggy, and Alfred Troyer's daughters, Martha and some of her sisters, had come over to visit. They were standing in front of the milk house, and so we took this picture from the kitchen window. And the reason I'm showing you this is that this is the distance Bobby ran from the kitchen to the barn. He would not use the bathroom inside, but he would use the manure trough in the barn to do his duty. And so Bobby would actually run that distance. In one winter, there was snow on the ground, it was very cold. He undressed completely, ran across the snow to the barn, and 1 minute later ran back. There were some people parked in our barnyard, and they turned around and left without ever conducting any business, because they thought, these people, if they have someone doing that, they must be so crazy, we don't want to do business with them. So that is that part of the story of Bobby's life. And then we have Bobby at Stockley. He went to Farnhurst for 6 months. After at age 14, in a rage, he broke out a lot of the windows in our farmhouse. So they put him in Farnhurst for the insane for 6 months. Then they transferred him to Stockley in Georgetown, Delaware for the mentally retarded. And he has lived there for about 40 years. And so here he was outside of one of the buildings in Stockley. At this point, this was 1962, he was about 14 years old, or 15. Here another picture of Bobby at Stockley, 14 or 15 years old. And he settled down to Stockley and continued to be very content there. But in about 2000, 2001, they moved him to a 4-patient home in the Georgetown area, a few miles from Stockley. And here I'm visiting him. I always brought him a Coke and some chips or candy. And Bobby works 5 days a week in Horton, Maryland, sorting from bin to bin. And he's with 3 other patients. And he also uses a refrigerator. He goes to church. He goes shopping. So he's really has a very productive, satisfying life there. And as soon as I have given him my Pepsi and candy and chips, he pushes me out and says, that's all for the day. So I try to visit Bobby 4 times a year as an honor to my mother Sylvia, because Bobby was very dear to her heart. And the last time we saw my mother alive, she couldn't talk, but as soon as we mentioned Bobby, she went, like that, as if Bobby was on her heart, and she wanted to make sure he was well taken care of. And so this is the story of Bobby. Brain damage, but we have always loved him and treated him as a member of our family. And this is the story of Robert Kenneth Mast.
That
Pepsi drink. Ooh. A little bit on the side of water. Where they got past? No, the weather got. That's all. Absolutely. Okay, that's fine. Bob at work. He's one of the few members of the family still gainfully employed. He's here in Hurlock, Maryland, at the community center, where he does sorting. Sorts. And so I brought him a Pepsi for a weather drink. If it's a drink. So I brought him a Pepsi. So he is enjoying the work break.
Not working on it. Don't have to I usually take him back to work.
The Bobby drinker that. So what is his name? Now Bobby drinker. Down good to the last drop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, good to the last drop. Yeah. Now Bobby that. Pepsi drinker. Can-made Pepsi. Yeah. Ay. I'll be going to go to work. I'm going to Hurlock, and I'm just doing the advocate. I guess you're going to work. Just doing the advocate. Yeah, Bobby Hurlock. Okay, you're going to Hurlock today. Have a good day. All right. So, all right. We'll stop by and see you again.
So what is that you said? This one is reading program.
Good to the last drop.
Once you get to the...
all right. Yeah, Pepsi drink.
It's on the lap up here. Once you cross over.
Pepsi drink.
I guess Lily and Clarence and John will come. See him because he's so close now.
He's what?
He's so close to the
Yeah, right. I'm sure. If he's on Hurlough.
Well, but they can just all see him.
Yeah.
On my computer.
No.
You can get a good picture of two of us.